The cold glass tower gleams as the first light of dawn kisses its surface. The city is alive, yet inside, all is quiet. A lone figure kneels, shackled in the heart of this empire, the echo of his sobs bouncing off the sterile, indifferent walls. He's a king in ruins, the vastness of his world reduced to this single desperate moment. His clothes are neat, but his hands tremble, cold, as they press against the floor for support. Outside the world keeps turning, but inside this fortress of steel and glass, a man is broken. And in the corner, a child stands, staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. The innocence of youth meets the weight of failure. The child's gaze is not one of fear or confusion. It's one of judgment. There's no pity, no softness. Only silence. Only the stillness of understanding something no child should have to comprehend. He built an empire, a voice whispers, the words floating into the cold air, but he couldn't save her. The whisper fades as the camera zooms in on the CEO's tear-streaked face. A man who once ruled the world, now reduced to a mere shadow of what he once was. His shoulders sag under the weight of his failures, but there's a flicker of something else in his eyes. Something that will drive him forward, no matter what it costs. The CEO's phone rings, its harsh sound shattering the silence. He hesitates, the weight of the call hanging heavy in the air. With trembling hands he picks it up, his breath shallow. The voice on the other end is clear, cold, and final. She's gone. Everything's gone, they say, and the world seems to pause. His face tightens, and for a fleeting second, it's as if he's lost the very air in his lungs. There's no shock, no disbelief, just a deep, profound sense of inevitability. This was coming, he knew it. He had seen it in the last glance he shared with her, in the last breath he took beside her. But hearing it, saying it aloud, it's still a dagger to the heart. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything, he mutters, more to himself than anyone else. He knows it's not just about fixing her, not anymore. It's about fixing himself, finding a way to claw his way back from this abyss. The phone call ends, and the silence feels more suffocating than ever. The child in the corner doesn't move. Neither does the man. Time itself has stalled, leaving only an echo of a past that's now gone forever. The phone call ends abruptly, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room is the CEO's ragged breathing. He places the phone on the floor beside him, its screen still glowing, but it feels like a world away. His gaze drifts to the window, but it's not the skyline he's looking at. It's the reflection of the man he's become. His once pristine suit now seems like a costume, a facade for someone who's lost everything. A billionaire reduced to this. A man who built an empire, only to watch it crumble, piece by piece. His eyes shift to the child standing silently in the corner. There's no softness in the child's gaze, no comfort to offer. The innocence that once shielded them is now gone, replaced by something more dangerous, a quiet understanding of the loss that hovers in the air. The CEO's throat tightens, the weight of the moment pushing against his chest. He tries to speak, to offer some words of hope, of something that might make this situation better, but the words don't come. I don't know how to fix this, he whispers, his voice barely audible. And in that silence he knows, he might never fix this. The empire is lost, and so is everything else he held dear. The child says nothing, still watching, still waiting. And for the first time he wonders, who is he now? The weight of the silence hangs heavy. The CEO finally pushes himself up, his body trembling as he stands, his movements slow and deliberate, as though the very act of standing is an immense effort. His gaze shifts from the window back to the child, who hasn't moved, who hasn't said a word. I'm sorry, he says quietly, his voice raw and filled with emotion. But the child remains unmoving, unfeeling. He looks away, feeling the sting of rejection, even from someone so young. His legs are unsteady, his mind racing. The city outside doesn't care. The people going about their daily lives don't care. He built this empire for them, for the world to see, and now it's all slipping away. He takes a deep breath, steadying himself before he turns to face the desk in the far corner. A stack of papers sits untouched, but he doesn't reach for them. Instead, his eyes fall to the photo frame beside the stack, a picture of his family. His heart aches, a sharp pain in his chest. He picks it up, his fingers trembling as they trace the edges of the photo. He should have been there. He should have seen this coming. But he didn't. And now, here he is. Alone. "I'm sorry," he repeats, but the words feel empty, meaningless. He places the photo back on the desk, the frame now slightly crooked, as if it too is mourning the loss of what once was. The child steps forward, their tiny footsteps muffled by the vast empty space. For a moment, the CEO is unsure what to expect. He's not sure what this child could offer him, what anyone could offer him. But then, the child speaks, their voice small but firm. "You have to fix it," they say, eyes wide and serious. The CEO looks down at the child, their words sharp, cutting through the fog of his despair. How could this little one understand? How could they ask him to fix what's already broken? But the child's gaze doesn't waver, and the simple clarity of their words strikes something deep inside him. For the first time since everything started to unravel, he feels a flicker of something, of responsibility, of purpose. The child walks up to him, placing a hand gently on his arm. The touch is small, innocent, but it's enough. For just a moment, the world outside seems to fade. The weight on his chest doesn't disappear, but it feels less suffocating. "I'll try," he says, his voice stronger than before. And, with that, the child nods, as if they've been waiting for him to say those words. The room, though still filled with emptiness, feels like a turning point. He knows that nothing will ever be the same again. But in that small, fragile moment, a new chapter begins. Years before, in a small, dimly lit living room, a boy of about 12 sat on the floor, his legs crossed in front of him. His father stood before him, tall and imposing, his face stern, every line etched with the weight of success. The boy could see the pride in his father's eyes, but it was the kind of pride that felt like a weight rather than a gift. His father, a man of ruthless ambition, had built everything they had, yet there was an emptiness in his eyes. The boy felt it. He always felt it, even as his father sat beside him on that old couch, asking questions, demanding answers, as if the boy was a reflection of his own failures. "You know what I did for you, right?" the father had asked, his voice thick with unspoken pressure. The boy nodded, not understanding fully, but sensing that his response was more of an expectation than a genuine inquiry. He felt it in his chest, a heaviness that he couldn't shake off. "I will never be like you," the boy swore silently to himself. And from that moment, he made a vow, though he did not know how impossible it would be. He would rise, he would succeed, but not at the cost of his soul, not at the price his father had paid. He would carve a path of his own, one where his worth was not defined by success alone. As the boy looked up at his father, he felt both fear and admiration, but most of all, an overwhelming sense of loneliness. He was destined to be someone else, but the journey would be long, and the cost would be high. Fast forward to the present. The young woman, no older than 29, stood in the middle of a sleek modern boardroom. The table was dark wood, glossy and polished, the chairs around it leather-bound and cold. She wore a sharp black blazer, her hair pulled back tightly, her gaze focused and determined. But as she spoke, presenting her ideas, pitching her vision, she noticed the subtle dismissals from the men around her, the raised eyebrows, the slow glances to the side, the sighs barely hidden. Her words fell on deaf ears, the weight of gender and youth bearing down on her. "I'm not asking for approval," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "I'm telling you this is the future." She had spent years building up the courage to speak in front of these men, to claim her place in this world that had always felt so foreign to her. But here she was again, a young woman being overlooked, pushed aside. A flash of frustration crossed her face, but she kept her composure. The quiet sting of rejection, of being dismissed by those who should have believed in her, burned deep within. She had once been told that women had to prove themselves harder, work longer, be smarter. She was living that reality now, and it was more exhausting than she had ever imagined. She clenched her fists beneath the table, vowing to herself that one day they would regret this. One day, they would see. She just had to keep pushing. On a cold rainy night, a young boy, no older than 10, sat alone on a wooden bench near the entrance of a small, cramped corner store. His worn backpack was on the ground beside him, his face pressed against the cool glass of the store's window. His mother, somewhere inside, was begging for a job she might never get. She spoke with a desperation that filled the tiny space, but the boy couldn't hear her words. He didn't need to. He knew the look on her face, the way her shoulders slumped, the way she forced a smile when the rejection came. He had seen it 100 times before. The world had never been kind to them. It had always been a battle for food, for a roof over their heads, for a place in a world that never seemed to care. But this time, as he sat alone, his small hands gripping the straps of his backpack, something inside him shifted. He couldn't keep going like this, couldn't keep watching his mother beg, couldn't stay small in a world that demanded everything from him. He promised himself in that quiet, forgotten corner of the world that he would make something of himself. He would never have to beg, never have to feel the weight of rejection like this again. He would rise, and he would make sure his mother never had to beg again. It wasn't a vow born of hope, it was born of survival. Several years later, the woman now stood at the pinnacle of her career, but she felt the weight of her family's decline on her shoulders. Her father's business was crumbling, and though her name had been built on success, it was now tethered to failure. She had fought tooth and nail to get here, to become the woman who could stand in front of the most powerful men in the world and command their attention. But now, as she stood in front of the same massive glass windows that once symbolized the future, she wondered if it had all been worth it. The board meetings, the constant proving, the exhausting climb to the top, all of it had come at a cost. She was cold, distant, and alone. Her family's fortune, built by her father's ruthless ambition, was slipping through her fingers, and she wasn't sure how to stop it. Her phone rang, but she didn't answer it. She didn't have the strength. She had already given too much, had already sacrificed everything she was. And yet, she felt more lost than ever. "I won't fail," she whispered to herself, but her voice cracked with the weight of uncertainty. In the midst of all the power, she felt weak. She felt like the little girl who had once been rejected, overlooked. Only now she wasn't sure if there was any place for her at the top. Walking down the snowy street outside, the woman felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The city was alive around her, but she felt out of place, like a stranger in her own world. She passed a small shop with a window full of handmade toys and scarves, and for a brief moment, she felt something familiar stir in her chest, a memory of simpler times. It was a brief flash, a fleeting glimpse of the girl she had once been. But as quickly as it came, it disappeared, swallowed by the reality of the life she had built. She had fought too hard to look back, too hard to turn away. She couldn't afford to be weak, to let nostalgia cloud her judgment. The pressure was always there, the constant reminder of everything that was at stake. But as she walked, her eyes caught sight of a small boy standing in front of the toy shop window, his face pressed against the glass, his expression one of quiet wonder. For a moment, she saw herself in him. She had been that child once, staring at a world she couldn't reach, but now, she was the one who built that world. And yet, it all felt hollow. Is it worth it? She thought. She had fought for success, but at what cost? In the deep hours of a restless night, the young woman sat hunched over her cluttered desk. Papers were scattered like fallen leaves, each page a blueprint for the future she was desperate to build. Her eyes were bloodshot from sleepless hours, flickering between a glowing laptop screen and the half-empty coffee cup that promised little relief. She typed with urgency, fingers dancing across the keyboard, sending emails that could change everything. Friends' messages went unanswered, birthdays passed without notice, and the world outside her window blurred into an indistinct hum. The weight of her ambition pressed down on her, a constant reminder that every step forward demanded sacrifice. She whispered to herself, "I won't stop, not until it's mine." The idea of giving up was unthinkable. Every sleepless night, Every moment of exhaustion was a price she willingly paid to prove she belonged. This wasn't just business, it was survival. Each word she typed was a brick laid toward the empire she was determined to claim. But deep inside, beneath the surface, the cost of this relentless pursuit gnawed at her soul. Was this rise worth the loneliness? The sacrifices? She couldn't afford to ask. Not yet. On the other side of the city, a man in his early 30s stood before a room full of skeptical investors. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady and full of conviction. This pitch was his lifeline, the one chance to secure the future of the business he had nurtured from nothing. Every second felt like an eternity as he laid out rejections, innovations, and promises of growth. The investors listened, their faces guarded, some whispering to each other. He felt the weight of their doubt, the sting of their indifference. The pressure mounted. This deal meant everything, but it came at a cost. He'd missed birthdays, lost friends, and sacrificed the small joys of life for this very moment. But when the nods of approval finally came, relief washed over him, fleeting and fragile. Victory tasted sweet, yet hollow. The cost of success was a quiet loneliness that no applause could erase. And still, he pushed forward. The empire he dreamed of was just beginning to take shape. Back at a small dining table in an empty apartment, the CEO sat alone, his untouched meal growing cold. His phone lay face down beside his plate, ignored for the 10th time that week. The empire demanded everything, his time, his energy, his soul, but gave back little in return. He hadn't seen his family in months. The hollow ache of absence was a constant companion. The silence around him was deafening, filled with the ghosts of lost moments and forgotten promises. Every call ignored, every missed birthday chipped away at the man beneath the title. His eyes were distant, staring through the window at a city that moved on without him. The weight of success was crushing, a burden that no amount of wealth could lighten. He whispered to himself, "I'll fix this." But even he wasn't sure if there was a way back. His empire was growing, but the man was shrinking. And the price was becoming unbearably high. Night after night, the CEO paced the length of his high-rise office, the city lights casting long shadows across the polished floors. Deals were made, alliances forged, and sacrifices accepted. But none of it came without cost. The relentless pursuit of power had consumed him, leaving behind a man haunted by the memories of birthdays missed and friendships lost. Each step echoed a lonely rhythm, a reminder of all he had given up. The empire was his life, but it was also his prison. He knew this pursuit was a double-edged sword, every victory cut deeper into his heart. Yet he pressed on, driven by an unyielding need to prove himself, to make everything right again. "I can't stop now," he muttered into the cold night, a mantra to fend off the creeping despair. He was trapped between the man he had been and the legacy he hoped to leave behind, and the gap grew wider with each sleepless night. For a brief, stolen moment, the woman gazed out of her office window at the setting sun, its fiery hues painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The city buzzed beneath her, alive and relentless. She had clawed her way to the top, but victory felt hollow. Friends had drifted away, relationships had fractured, and the price of success was evident in the lines around her eyes. She breathed deeply, wrestling with the question that lingered like a shadow. Was it worth it? The empire she was building demanded everything, and yet she wondered if what she had lost was more precious than what she gained. The silence of the room was broken only by the distant hum of the city. Her heart ached for something she could not name, a peace, a connection, a moment free of ambition. And yet, she knew she couldn't stop. Not yet. The fire inside her still burned, even as the weight of sacrifice threatened to consume her. The truth struck like a thunderclap. The man sat frozen in his sleek office, the walls suddenly closing in around him. His empire, the colossal business he had fought so fiercely to build, was not his alone. His co-founder, his sibling, the person he had trusted above all, had been quietly claiming credit, quietly steering the ship while he took the hits. The betrayal was visceral, cutting deeper than any financial loss. "How could you?" he whispered, voice breaking under the weight of the revelation. His mind raced through every meeting, every deal, searching for signs he had missed. The co-founder's face flashed before him, smiling, charming, but duplicitous. It was a fracture in everything he believed. He felt the ground give way beneath his feet, the empire he thought he controlled, slipping through his grasp. The shock was overwhelming, the betrayal, personal. And yet amidst the chaos, a spark of clarity emerged, a resolve hardened by pain. This was not the end. The battle had just begun. The woman uncovered a deeper wound. A mentor she had trusted implicitly had been siphoning funds, stealing from her vision, and betraying everything she stood for. It was a quiet theft, hidden beneath layers of false smiles and empty promises. As she stood in the cold boardroom where the truth was unveiled, her fists clenched at her sides, the betrayal felt like a knife twisting in her heart. "How could I have been so blind?" she murmured, the sting of deception sharper than any failure she'd faced before. Years of loyalty had been repaid with treachery. The man who taught her everything, who shaped her ambition, was now the architect of her downfall. Her empire was built on foundations cracking beneath her feet. The humiliation burned fiercely, but alongside it, a fierce determination blazed. She would rise again, but this time on her own terms. The CEO received the news he had been dreading. The disease was terminal. The doctor's words echoed in his mind, a cruel sentence he could not share with his team. The empire depended on his strength, but inside his body was failing him. He sat in his office late at night, staring blankly at the city lights below, feeling the weight of secrets pressing down. The diagnosis was a shadow that darkened every decision, every meeting, every conversation. To reveal it was to admit weakness, to hide it was to live a lie. He chose silence, burying his pain beneath the facade of control and power. But the loneliness was suffocating. Every breath was a reminder of time slipping away, every heartbeat a countdown. The man who had built an empire now fought a battle no one else could see. He whispered to the empty room, "I must be strong, for them." But strength was becoming harder to summon, and the end was inevitable. The confrontation was inevitable. In a stark meeting room, the woman faced her co-founder, the sibling who had been using her all along. The tension was electric, the air thick with years of betrayal and unspoken grievances. Their voices were sharp, accusations thrown like knives. "You thought I was a pawn," she spat, eyes blazing with fury. "But I'm no one's fool." The sibling's face was a mask of smug superiority, but beneath it, cracks of doubt began to show. What had once been a partnership was now a battlefield, trust shattered beyond repair. The woman's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a fierce resolve to reclaim what was hers. This was no longer about business, it was about justice, about taking back control. The room seemed to shrink around them, the echoes of their words filling the silence. The empire's foundation was shaking, and neither was willing to back down. Alone in his office, the man stared at the empty chair opposite him, a symbol of everything lost. The weight of failure settled heavily on his shoulders. The empire that had once been his life was now a distant memory, slipping through his fingers like sand. He whispered, "I've failed. I've lost everything." The silence that followed was profound, filled with the echoes of broken dreams and shattered trust. Yet beneath the despair was a faint glimmer of acceptance. Sometimes loss was the only path to truth. He closed his eyes and let the darkness wash over him, knowing that the world he'd built would never be the same. The ground beneath him had shifted, and there was no turning back. The collapse was complete, but from the rubble, something new might someday rise. The boardroom was a silent battlefield, the air thick with tension as every eye turned toward the CEO. This vote would decide the fate of everything, his empire, his legacy, and the fragile threads holding it all together. He stood at the head of the table, steady but weighed down by the gravity of the moment. The room was filled with faces both familiar and hostile, allies and adversaries, masked behind carefully neutral expressions. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm yet carried the weight of years of sacrifice and regret. This decision will not only shape the future of our company, but the lives of everyone within it. The silence that followed was deafening. Each member's vote was a step toward destruction or salvation. His heart pounded beneath the polished surface of his suit. This was the point of no return. The empire he had built, torn apart by betrayal and loss, now depended on a single, irreversible choice. The moment stretched, the seconds ticking like a countdown to an unknown future. Every breath, every heartbeat screamed, "This is it." At the podium, the young woman faced the crowd, her heart pounding fiercely beneath her tailored blazer. This was more than a speech, it was a reckoning. The room was packed with investors, journalists, colleagues, and rivals, all waiting to see if she would crumble or rise. She paused, steadying her breath, before unleashing words shaped by years of struggle and resolve. "This is who I am," she declared, her voice echoing through the hall, strong and unyielding. "I am not here to ask for permission. I am here to claim what is rightfully mine." Her gaze swept the room, capturing attention, breaking through skepticism. The speech was more than strategy. It was a declaration of identity and intent. Behind every sentence was the fire of battles fought in silence, the scars of rejection, and the unbreakable will to survive. When she finished, the room was silent, then stirred with murmurs of awe and disbelief. This was her moment, and she owned it. Late at night, in the quiet sanctuary of his daughter's room, the CEO finally allowed himself to feel the weight he had long hidden. The little girl slept peacefully, unaware of the storms raging outside. He sat beside her bed, running his fingers softly through her hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice thick with regret and love. The years lost, the moments missed, they all poured out in that single apology. His empire could crumble, his health could fail, but this, his family, was what truly mattered. For too long, ambition had built walls between them. Now, as the shadows danced softly on the walls, he vowed silently to make whatever time remained count. No empire, no fortune, no title could replace the quiet bond of a father and daughter. In that stillness, hope flickered, a fragile light in a dark, uncertain world. In the final board meeting, the CEO stood before the team, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I've done all I can," he declared. "Now, it's time to let go." The room held its breath. Years of power, struggle, and sacrifice culminated in this moment of surrender. The board members exchanged glances, some nodding in understanding, others masking disappointment. It was the end of an era, the collapse of a legacy built on fragile foundations. Yet in his eyes there was no defeat, only acceptance and a faint glimmer of peace. The silence that followed was heavy but necessary. Letting go was not giving up, it was allowing something new to begin. The man who had fought so fiercely for control now stepped back, trusting the future to those who would carry it forward. It was painful, irreversible, but it was the moment everything changed. On the rooftop of a tall building, the woman stood alone. The city spread out beneath her like a living map of dreams and failures. The night air was cold, but she felt a strange warmth inside, a quiet peace after the storm. The empire she'd fought for was in ruins, but she was free. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, tasting the bitter and sweet blend of loss and liberation. This was not the end, but a new beginning, a chance to rewrite the story on her own terms. The sacrifices still echoed, but so did the lessons and strength gained. She would build again, but differently, rooted in truth, courage, and a fierce love for herself. The lights of the city flickered below, endless and unyielding. She was ready. The CEO walked away from the empire he had built with trembling steps, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. The glass tower that once symbolized his power now stood behind him, cold and distant. He was no longer the man who ruled that world. As he stepped onto the quiet street below, the city's noise felt distant, almost unreal. He breathed deeply, feeling a strange lightness despite the losses. Letting go was painful, but it was necessary. I finally let it go, he whispered to himself, a quiet acceptance settling within. The company's legacy was no longer his burden to bear, it belonged to the future now. He carried the memories of triumph and failure alike, scars etched deep, but also the freedom to live anew. The past was behind him, and ahead was an uncertain horizon. For the first time in years he felt the possibility of peace. Freed from the chains of her family's legacy, the woman found herself standing before a small cafe she had opened on a quiet street. The scent of fresh coffee and warm bread mingled with the cool morning air. She smiled softly, a lightness in her eyes that had been absent for years. This was her future, carved from the ashes of ambition and heartbreak. The empire she left behind was not forgotten, but it no longer defined her. Here, she found a simple joy. The laughter of customers, the warmth of human connection, the freedom to create on her own terms. The scars remained, but so did the strength. She had given up a throne to find herself, and in that choice was a quiet victory. The sun rose higher, bathing the cafe in soft light, welcoming her into this new chapter. The man stood on a rooftop, gazing back at the sprawling cityscape that had consumed so many years of his life. The skyline shimmered beneath the twilight, a mosaic of light and shadow. He thought of the battles fought, the sacrifices made, not just for power, but for self-discovery. Though he had lost much, he realized he had found something invaluable, himself. The endless chase for success had faded into a quiet understanding of what truly mattered. As the wind whispered through the buildings, he felt a profound peace settle within. The empire was a part of him, but no longer the whole. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply, letting the past fall away. This was enough, a new beginning forged not from conquest, but from acceptance and hope. In a quiet living room filled with soft afternoon light, the CEO embraced his grown daughter for the first time in years. The years apart had left unspoken wounds and missed moments, but here, in this tender embrace, they found connection. "You're everything," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." She smiled softly, tears glistening in her eyes. The empire could crumble, legacies could fade, but family remained. This was the gift they both needed: presence, forgiveness, and love. Time would not undo the past, but it could build a new future. In this moment, the walls they'd built around their hearts began to fall. They held each other, fragile but hopeful, as sunlight poured through the windows, promising warmth after the storm. At a quiet gravesite beneath a canopy of autumn trees, the woman stood alone, her eyes fixed on the headstone of her mentor. Years of loyalty and betrayal, lessons learned and wounds endured, culminated in this final farewell. She traced the engraving with a trembling finger and whispered, "I'll carry you with me, but I'm not you." It was a moment of release, a letting go of the past that had shaped but no longer defined her. She turned away, feeling lighter, freer, ready to walk a path forged by her own choices. The leaves rustled softly, the sun filtering through the branches, casting dancing shadows. The legacy was complicated, but she had found her truth. The future awaited, uncharted and full of promise. The CEO stepped away from the towering glass building one last time, the city bustling around him but feeling distant and muted. The empire he had built was no longer his burden, yet it remained etched in his bones, his blood, sweat, and tears. He paused on the sidewalk, gazing up at the skyscraper that once defined his life. A quiet voice echoed inside. He left the company. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and exhaled slowly, a calm settling over his worn features. But then came the whisper, tender and persistent, but never left her. The memory of his daughter, her steady gaze, the fragile hope in her eyes anchored him. He understood now that his legacy was not measured in profits or power, but in love and forgiveness. As the city lights flickered to life in the evening sky, he turned and walked forward, no longer a man haunted by what was lost, but one ready to embrace what remains. In a quiet, dimly lit room, the woman stood before a tall mirror, her reflection fractured by the soft glow of fireworks bursting outside the window behind her. The celebrations echoed faintly, a world moving on, full of hope and renewal. Her face was a canvas of pride, regret, and newfound strength. Years of battles fought and lost flickered through her eyes, but now they shone with clarity. "I've made it," she thought, "not because of the empire, but because I survived the fall." The night air was cool, and she breathed deeply, feeling a subtle but profound shift within. She was no longer defined by titles or power, but by resilience and grace. The fireworks painted her silhouette in fiery hues, a symbol of the past burning away, and the future unfolding with promise. Alone, yet unbroken, she smiled softly, ready for whatever came next. A child's small hand reached up hesitantly toward the empty chair at the head of the vast boardroom table. The room was silent, bathed in the soft morning light, filtering through tall windows. The chair, once the throne of an empire, now awaited a new occupant, someone bearing the weight of legacy and possibility. The child's fingers brushed the polished wood, feeling the cold smoothness beneath. In that moment, the past and future collided, the ghosts of power and the dawn of new hope intertwined. The empire was hers now, though she did not yet know what that truly meant. The room felt enormous, filled with echoes of decisions and dreams, failures and triumphs. Yet the child stood firm, embodying the fragile promise of renewal. The silence held a breathless anticipation, the world watching quietly as a new story began. The CEO stood by the expansive window of a quiet penthouse, gazing out over the city's shimmering skyline. The weight of years lifted, replaced by a serene acceptance. He was a man transformed, not by power or fortune, but by the painful journey through loss and redemption. His reflection merged with the city lights, a silent testament to the roads he had traveled. The empire was no longer his identity, it was part of a larger story that included forgiveness, family, and healing. He turned away from the window, the quiet hum of the city filling the room. In his heart he carried a new legacy, not of domination, but of grace. The future stretched before him like the endless horizon, vast and unknown. And for the first time, he felt ready to step into it. In the final quiet moment, the grown child sat alone at the head of the boardroom table. The seat once occupied by power now held potential, a chance to rewrite the future. The air was thick with expectation but also possibility. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of history settle on her shoulders, tempered by the fierce fire of hope. This was her empire now, built not just on legacy, but on her courage to shape it anew. The city beyond waited silently, a living witness to dreams past and those yet to come. The voiceover whispered through the stillness, "The empire is hers now. A story, ending, a new one beginning. The future was hers to claim."